Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
I think we see through this post-interview this woman's struggle with what to do, with wanting to keep her privacy and not see her name and her family be smeared, as may happen, unfortunately, in the coming hours.
May.
On the other hand, you hear her struggling with the feeling that somehow she needs to speak out and has a duty to speak out to tell the public about this allegation. So you can see that in the interview. And I think we should go through the timeline, give people a sense of how this happened. She says that in July, she actually first called the Washington Post through one of those tip lines that's available. An anonymous tip line, wanting to let the Post know about this allegation. And interestingly, Alex, that was before Kavanaugh was nominated. It was when Kavanaugh was on the short list. Expected to be nominated, but not officially nominated. So she felt at the time she wanted to alert the Washington Post. Then she also alerted her local congresswoman, and then at the end of July, she wrote the letter to Feinstein's office, which we've all heard about. However, throughout the month of August, she wrestled with whether to go on the record, whether to stay anonymous, or whether to speak out and put her name onto it. And apparently, according to the Post, she decided to stay anonymous. She decided she did not want to come forward, quoting here, calculating that doing so would upend her life and probably would not affect Kavanaugh's confirmation. She said to the Post, why suffer through the annihilation if it's not going to matter? And of course, what happened in late August and early September is that her story was starting to leak out anyway. The existence of this Feinstein letter started to become better known. The website The Intercept wrote about it. Others wrote about it. So all of a sudden, there was this allegation, but not a face, not a name, just an anonymous allegation. And apparently, she has now changed her calculation. She feels she has to speak out publicly. And frankly, part of that's because reporters were starting to call her and email her and show up at her door. In the past few days, reporters from a number of news outlets have known her name, known her identity, and tried to reach out to her. And according to the Post interview here, which lays it out in great detail, she felt it was necessary to go on the record.
Oh, my God. So in one weekend, we went from parsing language about birth control, abortion, what do they call it? An abortion-inducing medication. In one weekend, we've gone from parsing language about birth control to attempted rape. Oh, my God. Maybe it is time to slow things down, Mitch. Just slow it down. Oh, my God. Did they pick Kavanaugh so Clarence Thomas wouldn't be lonely? So he would have somebody to talk to about, his youthful indiscretions? I mean, what is this? I mean, what kind of an atmosphere is the Supreme Court going to be if you put, an attempted rapist with a sexual harasser? I mean, who in the world would want to be a female justice? Sorry, it's a house-to-work environment. I can't accept your nomination. I mean, this is unbelievable. Imagine being a female justice with these guys on the Sotomayor and Kagan and, poor Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But even Roberts and Gorsuch and Alito, do they really want to be identified as part of a rape gang? I mean, the background of these two justices precludes them from even being a roadie for Guns N' Roses, for Pete's sake. For the love of Jesus. And now we understand why Mitch McConnell didn't want Kavanaugh on any of the lists that were submitted to the Heritage Foundation. He didn't want anybody to give Donald Trump the name of Kavanaugh because obviously he understood that there was a long-ass history. There were a lot of papers. There was a lot about torture. There was a lot about warrantless wiretapping. There was a lot about using stolen documents from the Democrat members of the Judiciary Committee back in 2002. And he lied under oath in 2004. And he lied again in 2006. And we showed you that by 2018, he was saying, yeah, well, sure. Everybody does it, right? So what is he going to say now? Everybody at his all-male prep school did it? Because apparently Donald Trump is one of those prep boys. I mean, this is just so sick. There are criminal defendants whose terms of parole would not allow them to be around the justices on the Supreme Court due to their moral turpitude. Just saying. This is unbelievable. So here's the thought, Republicans. If you want to stop having hearings about, and this makes Clarence Thomas look, stupid, because all Clarence Thomas did was repeatedly harass and make Anita Hill feel uncertain that she would get important cases if she didn't humor this man and listen to him talk about his long dong silver and how, sexually, wonderful he was when it came to oral sex. And who put a pubic hair on my Coke can? Was it you, Anita? Disgusting, right? Disgusting. But that pales in comparison because that was sexual harassment. This is violence towards this is so here's a thought. If Republicans really want to quit having their Supreme Court picks exposed as sexual predators, maybe you should try a woman once in a while. Maybe you should try nominating a woman once in a blue moon. And I don't mean Jeanine Pirro. I mean somebody who can still reproduce, who's got some thoughtful thoughts about abortifacient or facients, whatever they call the birth control now. So here's the story. This woman has come forward over the weekend, obviously. Dr. Blasey Ford. Her name is Dr. Christine Ford. And Dr. Ford teaches at several universities. She teaches at Palo Alto. She teaches at Stanford. She's a psychologist. And she apparently was at a house frat party, with this elite boys prep school. And she apparently had a horrible thing happen to her. Horrible. She was brought into a bedroom by two boys, one of whom is Brett Kavanaugh. The other one is a fall down, blackout drunk who wrote a whole book about his years as a blackout drunk. This is his best friend. He literally wrote a book called Wasted, something Gen X. Mark Judge is his name. And he's also written some really disgusting articles about body language and feminism. And is it a double standard if, he can't understand whether you're welcome in her, vagina. He can't figure it out. I mean, this guy is just unbelievable. These are really sick, twisted people who really do seek to control women. That is what this is. This is an attempt to control a woman. And so they took her into a bedroom. Obviously, one was watching. Mark Judge was watching. And Kavanaugh began to, he threw her down on a bed. He started to, she was wearing a bathing suit and something over it. He started to rip at her clothes to get her bathing suit off. And when she screamed, he put his hand over her mouth and turned up the music so no one would hear her screaming. And then Mark Judge apparently jumped on top of them. I don't know if it was to join in or what. And they toppled off of the bed and she found her chance to break free and get away. And she called an anonymous tip line at the Washington Post when Brett Kavanaugh's name was first put forward as being on a short list for the Supreme Court. She called an anonymous tip line at the Washington Post. And then she decided that she had to write to her local congresswoman. So she wrote to Anna Eshoo, who is her local congresswoman, because she's up in the Stanford area, Palo Alto. And so she told Anna Eshoo that she wanted to remain anonymous. She was just giving her local congressman some sort of an indication of the character of this man who was on a short list to be a Supreme Court justice for the rest of our lives. And then in July, when it was announced that he was going to have confirmation hearings, she decided to write to Dianne Feinstein of California, who sits on the Judiciary Committee as the ranking member. Well, Dianne Feinstein didn't tell the Democrats or anybody. She just passed it off to the FBI and said, investigate this. And she didn't use it. I guess because they understood that they had him lying under oath in 2004 and 2006, and really thought that the Republicans, for one time and one time only, would grow some sort of a spine and stop being ferrets and would understand that this man lied and was going to lie because he had lied in 2004 and 6, and he was going to lie in 2018. Now, this woman who came forward did not want her name out there. She did not want to testify. She did not want to expose her family to the kind of hate that she's already encountered on the social media from senators, from Chuck Grassley. You know, when Chuck Grassley first heard that there was a woman who was alleging that Brett Kavanaugh attempted to rape her, he put out a list of 65 women who Brett Kavanaugh never raped. Well, put my name on that list. Because Brett Kavanaugh never tried to rape me either. What's wrong with me? Oh, I didn't go to an elite prep school. Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, every woman in this audience, with the exception of, if Dr. Ford is listening, can actually put their name on that list and say, Brett Kavanaugh honestly did not attempt to rape me in high school. He did not. But in 2012, Dr. Ford was in couples therapy with her husband, and she told this story to her therapist. Now, this is 6 years ago she told this story, and she told her therapist that she was attacked by students from an elitist boys' school, and now the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation are, apparently going to put him on the Supreme Court where he can do that to the rest of the women in the country, She did express to her therapist 6 years ago that she was worried that he was a very well-positioned judge and could one day be nominated to the Supreme Court of the United States. Apparently, this woman knows exactly how this country works. And she described to her therapist what happened and that it haunts her. And of course, you're going to have people who are going to minimize the rape because of her age. So what is the appropriate age for rape? Is it 2 years old? Is that too soon? Is 4 too soon? Is 6 too late? If you're going to say you were raped at 14 or 15, is that what? I don't even get what is the proper age. What is the proper age? See what I mean? But what she has described is metaphorically what's going to happen to all women in the United States of America if this ideologue gets away with it. And the GOP will be happy to stifle our screams. They already have been. You saw the hearings. Why do you think there were all these women screaming in the back? Because we get what he's about. He's a control freak. He likes to control women. In August, Dr. Ford decided not to come forward because she didn't think it would have any effect on his confirmation. She said, quote, "Why suffer through the annihilation if it's not going to matter?" She really knows what it's like for women in this country. She really gets it. Really, really gets it.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Let's listen.
Kavanaugh is one of the finest people that I've ever known. He's an outstanding intellect, an outstanding judge, respected by everybody. Never had even a little blemish on his record. The FBI has, I think, gone through a process 6 times with him over the years where he went to higher and higher positions. He is somebody very special. At the same time, we want to go through a process. We want to make sure everything is perfect, everything is just right. I wish the Democrats could have done this a lot sooner because they had this information for many months, and they shouldn't have waited till literally the last days. They should have done it a lot sooner. But with all of that being said, we want to go through the process. One thing I will say is that, as I understand it, Judge Kavanaugh spent quite a bit of time with Senator Feinstein, and it wasn't even brought up at that meeting, and she had this information. So you would have thought certainly that she would have brought it up at the meeting, not wait till everything's finished and then have to start a process all over again. But with all of it being said, we want to go through a full process. I have great confidence in the U.S. Senate and in their procedures and what they're doing. And I think that's probably what they're going to do. They'll go through a process and hear everybody out. I think it's important. I believe they think it's important. But again, He is one of the great intellects and one of the finest people that anybody has known. You look at his references, I've never seen anything quite like it. So they'll go through that process and we'll get it done.
Did you look at his reference from Judge Kozinski, who had to resign because he was, also a guy who liked to share porn with his female clerks that Kavanaugh clerked for? Did you listen to his reference? These people are just so disgusting. And let me tell you what happened in August. In August, this woman took a polygraph test. Okay? That's what's different. She took a polygraph test in August because she knew she was going to get annihilated. She knew. She understood. Here is her attorney, Deborah Katz, this morning saying that she is that Dr. Ford is willing to testify under oath.
One of the therapist notes from a few years ago when she recounted this states that it was an attempted rape. My question to you is, does she consider this an attempted rape?
She does. She clearly considers this an attempted rape. She believes that if it were not for the severe intoxication of Brett Kavanaugh, she would have been raped.
The other person who was in the room, a man by the name of Mark Judge, according to your client, says this didn't happen. He said it's just nuts. This didn't happen. Your response?
Well, he's also written 3 books and many, many articles and Twitter posts that have all now been completely scrubbed from the public domain, where he acknowledges that that was behavior that from his Georgetown Prep School days, that they routinely engaged in tremendous drinking and really inappropriate behavior, and that the drinking was so severe that they were blacked out regularly. That's now been scrubbed.
Yeah. Ms. Katz, is your client willing to testify before the Judiciary Committee publicly and tell this story?
She is. She's willing to do whatever it takes to get her story forth, yes.
Does she think Judge Kavanaugh should withdraw his nomination? Is that what she hopes comes out of this?
She's not taking a position on that. She believes that these allegations obviously bear on his character and his fitness, and the denials, of course, also bear on his character and fitness.
Perhaps it's yeah. Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. She has taken a polygraph. She's a credible person. These are serious allegations, and they should be addressed. Yesterday, the White House would not even have the nominee acknowledge whether he knew her, and he's not being forthcoming.
She took a polygraph test. She submitted herself and her traumatic memory to a polygraph test before she came to the conclusion that she must testify because Brett Kavanaugh is lying. He's denied. I mean, he said, I have never done anything like what the accuser describes to her or to anyone. Because this never happened, I have no idea who was making this accusation until she identified herself today. I see. So you and your friend would get blackout drunk and then use the condition of being blacked out drunk as a reason to say, I don't remember her. Yeah, because you were blacked out drunk. And for Donald Trump to put Judge Kavanaugh alongside of all his favorite good guys, really good guy, you should read his resume, said the same thing about Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who we learned was giving out prescription drugs on an airplane without, prescriptions. Giving people, Provigil to wake up and Ambien to go to sleep. And he's a great guy. And, Senator Tester is the bad son of a bitch. And he knows things about, Senator Tester. He goes out there and he's going to trash him. And he goes out there and he doesn't trash him because he doesn't have anything. And then Paul Manafort, he's a really good guy. He's a brave guy. He's not a flipper. Right? He's a good guy. Michael Flynn, he's a really good guy. Let Flynn go. Can you let Flynn go? He's a very good guy. All these people that Donald Trump vouches for all end up pleading guilty to something. Like I said, if you accept a nomination from the sleaze, you're going to wake up with fleas. Who would accept a nomination from an unindicted co-conspirator? And that is what the President of the United States is. In fact, It's what he is. Michael Cohen, his own lawyer, at his allocution, meaning when he pled out loud to the judge, said that he did these things, these criminal things, these felonious things, at the behest of and by direction of Donald J. Trump, which makes Donald J. Trump an unindicted co-conspirator in a courtroom. Not in my mind, not in the press, not in the New York Times, not in the Washington Post, not in the Wall Street Journal, in a court. In a court. So, why am I surprised? Why? This guy, this Mark Judge, you want to see something? Okay, look at this. This here is a collection of photographs taken by Mark Judge. These are the things he likes to take pictures of. Looks to me like they're all young girls. Very young. Oh my God, what is she, 15? Is she 15? Yeah, she's 15. Young. Oh, look, she's in a bathtub. Young girls. These are on a hotel bed, really? These are all his photographs, okay? These are all the things that he had been posting. Oh my God, that girl's like 13. On his Flickr page, okay? And these pages have been scrubbed, but not completely, because here they are. This guy, Mark Judge, has written the following. Feminists argue that no means no, and that men need to understand that. But here's what I don't get. If there is a female and human body language that gives out cues to someone's mood, temperament, and level of sexual interest, does the body also have a language during sexual activity itself? If a woman does something in a porn movie that signals that her body is something to be abused and violated in violent ways, that's just her choice. Suddenly, her body language is completely irrelevant and, quote, it's just porn. Or even, lie of lies, quote, empowering. And what about Slut Walk, the organization that fights rape but has marches where scantily dressed women protest that what a woman is wearing is never an excuse for rape? Of course, there is never any excuse to rape someone, but can you believe there's a but after that? But it's possible to have two seemingly contradictory thoughts to be both equally true. There's never any excuse to rape, a crime that I think is almost akin to murder, because the rapist kills part of the human soul. Oh, you think? And yet what women wear, what women wear and their body language also sends signals about their sexuality. The signal is not that they should be raped, but if a posture while drinking coffee is indicative of the soul and personality within, then so is marching down the street in your underwear. I could march down the street stark-ass nude, and that does not mean you can touch me, rape me, or do anything violent to me, ever. And then he quotes Father Paul Quay, a brilliant Jesuit priest. You know, I got to tell you, these Catholic boys, a lot of them have been really screwed up. In his book, The Christian Meaning of Human Sexuality, oh my God, Father Quay made a simple observation that struck me as deeply profound. He observed that during the sexual act, the woman, quote, opens herself up to the man, and the man, quote, penetrates the woman with his essence. With his essence? The act itself is one of mutual submission. The woman offers her beauty, tenderness, and love to the man, and the man puts his physical strength, courage, and love into the service of the woman. In other words, the bodies themselves have powerful symbolism. In fact, the body language during sex has a theological meaning that's even more powerful than a vibe given off at Starbucks. Oh, arch your back and bend your knee and pray for forgiveness, you freak. Oh, my God. And then he starts saying sexual progressives have to make up our minds. Like if we wear something that might turn you on, somehow we're responsible for your essence being in my vagina. He also wrote for the Daily Caller, and he wrote a book about his alcoholic past, about blackout drinking. That's not going to make him a very credible witness over here. In his book, he refers to, because he's changed the names, instead of Brett Kavanaugh, he calls him, wow, who would ever connect these two names? Bart O. Kavanaugh. What is he, Sarah Palin talking to Joe Biden? You remember during the debate, she kept calling Biden O. Biden? Yeah. In the book, he calls Brett Kavanaugh Bart O. Kavanaugh. And, quote, he puked in someone's car the other night and passed out on his way back from a party. Let him do a scene in Dazed and Confused. Just keep him off the Supreme Court. Do you want a drunk who molests women on the Supreme Court? I swear to God, the only thing that separates him from Donald Trump is the drunk part. Oh, my God, this is frightening. This is just, I got to, and you know what? Forget, the idea that this has to get this far, knowing that he lied, we showed you him lying. We showed you him lying in 2004. We showed you him being questioned by Orrin Hatch, who's legal counsel. Orrin Hatch's guy on Orrin Hatch's staff was one Manny Miranda, who stole Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee's documents over a period of years, handed them to Brett Kavanaugh to use. And Brett Kavanaugh swore under oath he never saw them. He didn't know anything about stolen documents until he read it in the newspaper many years later. Well, that's what Brett Kavanaugh is saying here now, too. I didn't know who she was till I read it in the newspaper. Funny, they have very few excuses, these frat boys. No, the reason why Kavanaugh shouldn't be confirmed is because Kavanaugh lies under oath and will again if we have hearings, just like Clarence. Do you remember Clarence? Here's Anita Hill. Let's refresh.
I declined the invitation to go out socially with him and explained to him that I thought it would jeopardize at what at the time I considered to be a very good working relationship. I had a normal social life with other men outside of the office. I believed then, as now, that having a social relationship with a person who was supervising my work would be ill-advised. I was very uncomfortable with the idea and told him so. I thought that by saying no and explaining my reasons, my employer would abandon his social suggestions. However, to my regret, in the following few weeks, he continued to ask me out on several occasions. He pressed me to justify my reasons for saying no to him. These incidents took place in his office or mine. They were in the form of private conversations which would not have been overheard by anyone else.
You know how brave that is?
My working relationship became even more strained when Judge Thomas began to use work situations to discuss sex. On these occasions, he would call me into his office for reports on education issues and projects, or he might suggest that because of the time pressures of his schedule, we go to lunch to a government cafeteria. After a brief discussion of work, he would turn the conversation to a discussion of sexual matters. His conversations were very vivid. He spoke about acts that he had seen in pornographic films involving such matters as women having sex with animals and films showing group sex or rape scenes. He talked about pornographic materials depicting individuals with large penises or large breasts involved in various sex acts. On several occasions, Thomas told me graphically of his own sexual prowess. Because I was extremely uncomfortable talking about sex with him at all, and particularly in such a graphic way, I told him that I did not want to talk about these subjects.
They didn't believe her. Nobody believed her, and Clarence Thomas sat there and lied.
Senator, I would like to start by saying unequivocally, uncategorically, that I deny each and every single allegation against me today that suggested in any way that I had conversations of a sexual nature or about pornographic material with Anita Hill, that I ever attempted to date her, that I ever had any personal sexual interest in her, or that I in any way ever harassed her. A second, and I think more important point, I think that this today is a travesty. I think that it is disgusting. I think that this hearing should never occur in America. This is a case in which this sleaze, this dirt, was searched for by staffers of members of this committee, was then leaked to the media, and this committee and this body validated it and displayed it at prime time over our entire nation. How would any member on this committee, any person in this room, or any person in this country would like sleaze said about him or her in this fashion?
Then don't
or
do
this
it.
Dirt dredged up, and this gossip, and these lies displayed in this manner? How would any person like it? The Supreme Court is not worth it. No job is worth it. I'm not here for that. I'm here for my name, my family, my life, and my integrity. I think something is dreadfully wrong with this country when any person in this free country would be subjected to this. This is not a closed room. There was an FBI investigation. This is not an opportunity to talk about difficult matters privately or in a closed environment. This is a circus. It's a national disgrace. And from my standpoint, as a black American, as far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching for uppity blacks who in any way deign to think for themselves, to do for themselves, to have different ideas. And it is a message that unless you kowtow to an old order, this is what will happen to you.
Oh, please.
You will be lynched, destroyed, caricatured by a committee of the U.S. Senate rather than hung from a tree.
Damn. Played the race card. What does that have to do with it? Well, Kavanaugh is not black. He can't play the race card. So he'll play the I was blacked out, I don't remember a thing card. I mean, what did Anita Hill have to gain by telling the world that Clarence was a perv? Zero. Nothing. Nada. Goose egg. Squat. Donut. And she was pilloried. And the same thing, this is why this woman did not want to put her name out there. She just wanted to be anonymous. She called a tip line at the Washington Post, an anonymous tip line. She told her House member, who has nothing to do with the confirmation, and then when it became obvious that this man was going to be confirmed, she said, whoa, wait, I'm going to go. I'm going to take a lie detector test. I'm going to get my my notes from my therapy sessions so I have some documentation, something.
Christine Blasey Ford. Her story was revealed in the Washington Post yesterday. She alleges that back in high school, over 30 years ago, that man, Brett Kavanaugh, accosted her. She was assaulted.
You don't automatically necessarily need to be believed. You have to have evidence and credibility to be believed.
An 11th hour effort to derail Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court nomination tells you everything you need to know about today's left.
This has all the hallmarks of an 11th hour character assassination.
11th hour attempt to smear, slander, besmirch the character of Judge Kavanaugh.
11th hour political hand grenade.
They wanted this to come out right before the vote. That's why, Tom, wake up. Just like they did with Justice Thomas.
This was in the early 1980s. It's now 2018. She was 15 years old. She's now 51. There is ground for some suspicion there.
Law enforcement would view it very, very skeptically because of the passage of time.
What took them so long?
Desperate attempt to try last minute to derail Judge Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation.
It's just the timing of it that a lot of Republicans are questioning now.
She had repressed her memory supposedly till 2012, but it was when he was up for the Supreme Court that suddenly the stakes got higher.
So it makes one wonder if this was timed.
It is fair to question the timing of this.
The timing here is very suspect. Why now? Why didn't this come out earlier?
I don't think there's any denying that this is unusual.
Somebody has to know what her reputation was in school. Was she known to be truthful, honorable, honest? Well, how about her former boyfriends? I mean, yeah, I'm sorry, but if you're going to go there, then let's go there.
Never told anybody till 2012, and she just said a group of frat boys were drunk and jumped on top of me for a few seconds in a bed. I think a group of frat boys beat me up a couple times, but he actually was Brett. In fact, I'm not a secret source. Brett Kavanaugh in 1986 came to Dallas, Texas, and I was in high school, and he raped me.
You have to press her on any potential bias.
This whole thing, this is a woman looking for her Anita Hill moment. This is her 15 minutes.
I have no idea if Judge Kavanaugh pushed this woman down on a bed at a high school house party where she wriggled free and ran away or not. What I do know is, in the 35 years since, not one other woman has raised such an allegation. 65 other women have, in fact, now come to his defense.
This is an insult to real assault cases and real sexual harassment. Women who've been victimized should see this for what it is, a pure political attack, late hit on a great man.
Okay, it's a late hit. It's the 11th hour. Why is it the 11th hour? What is the timetable here that we're under? What is the pressure that we're feeling that we have to confirm him Thursday or next Wednesday? Who set this timetable? Why are they saying this? I have no idea. They set these fake timelines like it must happen now. You know why I think they think it must happen now? Because I think they understand that if they started anew with a new nominee, they'd have to go through the whole process again. Yes, the FBI would be asked to vet the new nominee. They would have to go through their process, and then they would have to go through hearings and documents and discovery, and Charles Grassley would have to claim that the documents were protected, and then they'd have to go to the National Archives and make sure that they didn't release and that only the National Crisis Now or whatever right? And then by the time this nominee was brought in front of a new Senate, the Senate will be in Democratic hands. See what I mean there? There's a fake timeline afoot. There is no timeline on a Supreme Court nominee. There is no timeline. This 11th hour, and you know what? They got Mitch McConnell saying these are their talking points. There is no question that these are their talking points.
Now, an accusation of 36-year-old misconduct dating back to high school has been brought forward at the last minute in an irregular manner.
Irregular?
It is an accusation which Judge Kavanaugh has completely and unequivocally denied.
On a phone
call. It is an accusation which the ranking member of the Committee of Jurisdiction has known about for at least 6 weeks. known about for 6 weeks, yet chose to keep secret until the 11th hour. Neither she nor any of her Democratic colleagues chose to raise this allegation during the committee staff's bipartisan background calls with the nominee. They did not raise it, even with the name redacted. In the 65 meetings Judge Kavanaugh held with senators before his confirmation hearing, including his private meeting with the ranking member. They did not raise it, even with the name redacted, in 4 days of exhaustive public hearings while Judge Kavanaugh testified under oath. Even though they chose to raise myriad other matters at the hearing, including sometimes a bizarre innuendo.
Can he read?
They did not raise it in the closed session, the proper forum where such an allegation could have been addressed with discretion and sensitivity. They did not raise it in the 1,000+ follow-up questions that senators sent to Judge Kavanaugh in writing. But now, at the 11th hour, with committee votes on schedule, after Democrats have spent weeks and weeks searching for any possible reason that the nomination should be delayed, now they choose to introduce this allegation.
They didn't choose to introduce this allegation, okay? They didn't choose jack crap. They didn't know, just like you didn't know. No one knew anything about this allegation except for Senator Dianne Feinstein, who passed it to the FBI to include in his background check. And the FBI cannot do anything on an additional piece of information regarding his background check unless the President of the United States requests that the FBI do so. That is a very important key fact, and it makes so obvious all these lies that the Republicans are telling, obvious lies. God must be laughing at Brett Kavanaugh, though. I mean, just as an aside, I mean, here's a guy who wrote these really sick, prurient sexual questions for Bill Clinton in the Starr investigation back in the day. He wrote questions about positions and dresses and cigars and implements and trash cans and all kinds of really sick stuff, to the point where when the Starr report came out, of course I had to read it. I was covering it that whole year of 1998. It read like an Anne Roquelaure novel. It read like The Taming of Beauty. Do you know what I mean? It was so pornographic, and this was all Brett Kavanaugh's doing. And now that man who said, I can't let Bill Clinton go. I have to ask these sexual questions. We need to know. America needs to know if the president is a pervert. America needs to know about a consensual affair that the president of the United States was having with an intern at the White House who was in love with President Bill Clinton. Oh, America has to know. America has to know. And now this same man has been nominated by a president who endorsed Roy Moore, a pedophile, for the Senate, who has 20 current accusers accusing him of inappropriate groping and sticking his hand up their skirt on airplanes and throwing them down on beds and forcing himself on them. 20 accusers, and appeared on an Access Hollywood tape saying, well, when you're a star, you can do anything. You can grab them by the, and admitting to it. And he's been nominated by that kind of a man. And now all of a sudden there are accusations, credible accusations of sexual assault. I got to tell you, this is just, this is an Alanis Morissette song. It's like Rain on your wedding day. It's the free advice that you just can't take. And who would have thought it figured? No, but they're all saying, oh, it's about the timeline. It's about the timeline. This is the 11th hour. Why did she wait so long? Why did she wait so... Listen, she never would have said anything had the pervert not nominated Brett Kavanaugh. And now the senators think that the way to handle this is to have 2 witnesses on Monday. 2 witnesses. Brett Kavanaugh, who is a skilled lawyer. Brett Kavanaugh, who has lied about receiving stolen documents. Brett Kavanaugh, who lied and said that he wasn't involved in the warrantless wiretapping program. Brett Kavanaugh, who lied and said he wasn't involved in the interrogation, the harsh interrogation tactics, also known as torture. Brett Kavanaugh, who was receiving stolen documents from Orrin Hatch's guy, Manny, I keep wanting to say Noriega. That's probably one of Manafort's clients. But yeah, I mean, it's just so, Manny Miranda, you have all of this lying under oath that went on with Brett Kavanaugh, and the president saying he's without a spot on his resume. He's so good. He's so good. Now, I got to tell you, the most important thing that you need to know is that the White House must ask the FBI to vet Kavanaugh. Remember, this is not a criminal proceeding. Unfortunately, in this country, the statute of limitations on rape is not very long. And so this is not a criminal proceeding. This is also not a question of whether we want to fire Brett Kavanaugh. This is not a question of whether or not we want to take away his freedom or deprive him of liberty or put him in jail, which would be another way of saying those things. This is not that. There is no standard of criminal proof that's required here. This is a job interview, for God's sake. That's all this is. This is a job interview for one of the biggest freaking jobs that this country has, and that is a lifetime appointment to the highest court in the land. It's a job interview. And if you were going for a job interview, they would check your credit rating. Well, here's another interesting point about Brett Kavanaugh. He had all this debt because he was buying Nationals tickets, and then a year later it was all paid off. I mean, come on. This is a job interview. This isn't about putting him in jail. This isn't about removing him from his job. This is a lesser standard of proof than Les Moonves, because they were looking to fire him. This is less of a standard of proof required to remove Charlie Rose or Roger Ailes or Bill O'Reilly, who paid millions of dollars for sexual harassment. What is wrong with people? Why don't you understand? This is just a job interview, and we need more than one witness.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Will you ask the FBI to open its file, sir? Will you ask the FBI to open its file?
How important is I don't think the FBI really should be involved because they don't want to be involved. If they wanted to be, I would certainly do that. But as you know, they say this is not really their thing. But I think politically speaking, the senators will do a very good job.
You know, he lied right there. I'm shocked. Alert the media. He lied. No, seriously, he says it's not the FBI's thing. The FBI, I thought, was the exact organ that investigated Brett Kavanaugh and vetted him for the nomination process. Yes, that's true. That is what the FBI does. The White House requests and has to request from the FBI, not a criminal background check, a vetting for a Supreme Court nominee, a vetting for people who to get security clearances, etc., etc. This man is a liar. It's not their thing. You know why? Because he won't ask the FBI to open its file. He won't ask the FBI to vet this allegation. And he got caught today, too, because he actually said, oh, well, they don't want to be involved. It's not their thing. And then said, well, they vetted him 6 times before. Yeah, before the allegation, right?
On Judge Kavanaugh yesterday, you said, we want to go through a full process. You said, we want to make sure everything is perfect, everything is just right. To that end, what would be the problem with the FBI reopening their background investigation into Judge Kavanaugh? Would you support such a thing?
It wouldn't bother me, other than the FBI, John, said that they really don't do that. That's not what they do.
Don't do
Now,
that?
they have done supposedly 6 background checks over the years as Judge Kavanaugh has
'Cause
gone
that's who
beautifully up a
does
ladder.
them.
He's an incredible individual, great intellect, great judge, impeccable history in every way, in every way. I feel so badly for him that he's going through this, to be honest with you. I feel so badly for him. This is not a man that deserves this. This should have been brought to the fore. It should have been brought up long ago. And that's what you have hearings for. You don't wait till the hearing is over and then all of a sudden bring it up.
That is not what happened, okay? If you must know, what happened is, in July, the woman who we now know is Christine Blasey Ford, Dr. Ford, actually called the Washington Post tip line, a confidential, anonymous tip line. And then after that, she wrote a confidential letter to Anna Eshoo, her local congresswoman, who has nothing to do with confirmations of Supreme Court justices because she's in the House of Representatives. And then slowly but surely, Anna Eshoo gave a copy of, Anna Eshoo told Dianne Feinstein that there was a confidential person who wanted to remain anonymous and did not want to press this any further. Did not. That was her wish, not to press this any further, but told Anna Eshoo and gave Anna Eshoo permission to tell Dianne Feinstein, because Dianne Feinstein was on the Judiciary Committee and thought she should know. And when Dianne Feinstein was told about it, it included a letter, a confidential letter, that Christine wrote to Dianne Feinstein, making her wishes clear. I do not want to press this any further. I want to remain anonymous. I don't want any of the public attention. I don't want to risk my family. I don't want whatever. Her story leaked anyway. The Intercept reported that Dianne Feinstein had a letter describing an incident that included a woman and Judge Kavanaugh while they were in high school, and that Dianne Feinstein was refusing to share it with even her Democratic colleagues, so that no one knew about it except Anna Eshoo in the House and Dianne Feinstein. And they honored her request, which was she does not want the matter pressed. Dianne Feinstein then issued a statement after it was leaked that there existed a letter like this. Her statement read, I have received information from an individual concerning the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. That individual strongly requested confidentiality, declined to come forward or press the matter further, and I have honored that decision. I have, however, referred the matter to federal investigative authorities. She did what she thought she had to do. She gave it to the FBI, who vets nominees for these kinds of positions. And after that letter was given to the FBI, the president has steadfastly refused to ask the FBI to investigate the matter. And without the president asking for that to be done, it shall not be done. So the FBI simply took the letter and added it to Kavanaugh's background file. That is according to an aide on the Judiciary Committee. Then, as soon as people heard there was a letter, this crazy judicial crisis network started reaching out to friends of Kavanaugh and women especially and said, oh, you got to sign a letter vouching for his character. And Grassley elevates it by getting 65 women to sign a letter. By the way, 200 women from the school that Miss Ford, Dr. Ford went to, have also signed a letter saying that they had heard stories like this about Georgetown prep boys, and that a lot of the girls that went to this all-girls school were also survivors of sexual assault from these boys, and they totally believe her. So the same thing happened on the other side. But Grassley went straight into the Judicial Crisis Network and said, get me names of women, get them to sign a letter, blah, blah, blah. And that's what happened. And now the thing now the pressure grew. The New York Times then reported that the incident involved possible sexual misconduct. And by that time, Miss Ford, Dr. Ford, started to be afraid that she would be exposed. People were clearly looking for who she was, what her identity was, and a BuzzFeed reporter then visited her home and tried to speak to her. Another reporter started calling her colleagues. Remember, she's a professor. She teaches graduate students at Palo Alto in Palo Alto, California, in a consortium of Stanford graduates. So, and then on Friday, the New Yorker reported the contents of the letter and did not reveal her identity. And then Chuck Grassley released the letter from 65 women who said that they knew Kavanaugh at Georgetown Prep. And then, as her privacy was obviously being chipped away and inaccurate things were being reported about her, and she was getting increasingly visited by reporters, she decided, quote, "These are all the ills that I was trying to avoid. Now I feel like my civic responsibility is outweighing my anguish and terror about retaliation." And that is why it came so late. Not that it should matter. For 36 years, this woman didn't tell anybody but her husband, and her husband, obviously, knew in 2012. That's 6 years ago. That's way before Brett Kavanaugh was floated as a Supreme Court nominee. And her husband found out because they were in couples therapy. She was exhibiting classic symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Obviously, it was interfering in her marriage. And so her therapist said, let's talk about this. Let's get it out in the open. Let's, release all of this, pent up anguish that you have. And her husband was in the room. His name's Russell Ford. And Russell Ford knew about this, and she named Kavanaugh, knew about this 6 years ago. What, she's clairvoyant too? And 6 years ago, she planted the seeds with the therapist notes? See, this is the thing. All that the Republicans want to do is they want to call her and they want to call Kavanaugh, and that's the end of it. Now, you know what's really creepy about that? The therapist has notes. Her husband was in the room in 2012, 6 years ago. She's taken a lie detector test since that was administered by a former FBI agent at her lawyer's request, Deborah Katz. And she passed it. So there's that. There's her husband knowing. There's therapist notes. And there was another guy in the room when this happened. And the other guy in the room is this guy, Mark Judge. And Mark Judge wrote a whole book about how him and Brett and the boys at Georgetown Prep were blackout, drop-dead keggers. And in the yearbook, Brett Kavanaugh's yearbook, he says he was part of these two keg clubs, okay, that they drank their way through Georgetown Prep. So what is going to come of a ridiculous hearing that would be, see, and this is exactly what they did with Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas. That's why I played you that stuff yesterday, because for me, this was like a repeat of what I saw in 1991. Why? Because it was the same exact situation. Clarence Thomas had already gone through his confirmation hearing, and Anita Hill came forward after that. And when she came forward after that, they had an additional session, an additional hearing. However, Anita Hill was left on her own to testify, and then Clarence Thomas was called to testify, and that was the extent of the hearing. It was her word against his word, and he played the race card and said this was a high-tech lynching, and this was happening because he thinks that they were treating him like an uppity black man, right? And he had to be defeated. So somebody found this woman to come forward and say that all he did was talk to her about sex. All he did was talk about Coke cans and pubic hairs and Long Don Silver movies and oral sex and all that while he was supervising her work, which she liked, and, the work she liked. And she felt that if she didn't somehow make it clear to him that this was just so uncomfortable, and she did. She told him. But, there were other women who could have come forward. They were never called. The same thing is going to happen here. If the FBI is not allowed to do a background check, which the president says, oh, it's not their thing. Of course it's their thing. This is not a criminal investigation by the FBI that you're asking for, which is what is going on against you, Mr. President. That is a criminal investigation. That's probably a RICO investigation. That's a racketeering investigation that's going on, and you are obviously a subject of that investigation. This is not that. This is saying that the FBI, who vets candidates, who vets people for security clearances, etc., that they be asked by you to open up a new vetting, including the new information. That is what is not happening. And it's going to be a repeat. It's going to be her word against his. And you know something? If that's the case, this is why I would not go. If I were her, I would not go. I absolutely would not go. Because the amount of vitriol and the vicious attacks that she will face by the likes of one Orrin Hatch, who is just so creepy because it was his counsel, Manny Miranda, who was stealing the documents that he oh, it's just so sick. This is such a rigged system. This is such I mean, you talk about cooperation from these crazy Republicans. There was another boy in the room. You don't want to call him. There's a therapist who knew about this 6 years ago. She has a husband who knew about this 6 years ago. You don't want to call any of them? You don't want the FBI to do a background check? The FBI can always follow up on leads. They could talk to her husband. They could talk to the therapist. Yeah, you see what I mean? This is so sick. This is so twisted. And already they're putting money on the TV. And by the way, let me just play Kamala Harris, because Kamala Harris was a prosecutor. I love the way they go, oh, the Democrats, well, we hate law and order. They're not about law. Yeah, that's why, half of our representatives, in the Senate are ex-prosecutors. Prosecutors who prosecute crime. Durbin was a prosecutor. Leahy was a prosecutor. I mean, they're all prosecutors. Everybody on our side is a freaking prosecutor. Kamala Harris is a prosecutor, too. And she's trying to get it across to everybody what I was tweeting last night, because there are trolls out there. There are people that just don't want to read. They don't want to understand that there's a lie detector that, the results of which could be investigated by the FBI. The test was administered by a former FBI agent at the behest of her lawyer. There are therapist notes. There's her husband who was in the sessions when she was reliving this, trauma. There are other girls who went to school with her. You know what I'm saying? There's so many people you could talk to. They don't want the FBI to take this up. And that's what Kamala Harris was asked about this morning.
You were California's Attorney General, a former prosecutor. Would you be able to bring a case like this, 36 years old, to trial?
Potentially, but I think that the issue here is that this is not about necessarily a criminal investigation. This is also about what we need to do around a background investigation into who Brett Kavanaugh really is. The American public deserves to know the character of someone who will serve for his entire life on the highest court in our country. And I think one of the issues that is getting a bit conflated here is the distinction between a criminal investigation and a background investigation.
Right.
I want to know about this guy's background, and the American public wants to know about his background. We need to know, are we about to put somebody on the United States Supreme Court who committed a sexual assault?
So the FBI has done 6 background checks. Are you calling into question the integrity of the FBI?
No, I don't think we have to go there, Nora. I think that the issue is that the FBI needs to do a background check on this particular issue and provide it to the United States Senate, who has a constitutional responsibility to advise and consent on a nominee to our highest court, who will, again, serve for his lifetime.
Senator Harris, this is a classic he said, she said case. Somebody isn't telling the truth.
It shouldn't be.
He says he wasn't even at the party. So what is your process to determine who's telling the truth here?
Well, listen, I think it's going to be about, it comes down to credibility, to your point, Gail, and it's going to be about listening to what each party has to say, but I believe her. Listen, first of all, anybody who comes forward at this point to be prepared to testify in the United States Senate against someone who is being nominated to one of the most powerful positions in the United States government, that takes an extraordinary amount of courage. And frankly, you know, I have personally prosecuted sexual assault cases, and my concern is, and she knows this, she is putting herself out there knowing that they're going to try and excoriate her. And she's doing it, I believe, because she knows that this is an important matter. It's a serious matter who serves on that court, and she has the courage to come forward. She has nothing to gain.
Exactly. She has nothing to gain. But you know what? That only skirted the issue. The issue is that the FBI cannot continue to do the background check unless the president asks for that to happen. And the president will not ask for that to happen because he said it's not their thing, even though they've done 6 background checks on Brett Kavanaugh without this information included. What would be the risk of doing a background check with this information now included? It shouldn't be a he said, she said. There was another person in the room named Mark Judge. There were other girls she went to the school with. There is a lie detector test. There are therapist notes. Her husband has known about this for 6 years. There were 2 other boys at the party. You know what's interesting is Brett Kavanaugh denies being at the party, and Dr. Ford only remembers that there was a party in 1982. Was he not at any parties in 1982?
Connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844. Would you ever put a crime survivor on the stand, let alone before the American people, without first doing an investigation?
I believe that the FBI, Nora, to your point, it should be compelled to do its job in terms of completing their background investigation. And that's not being done. And the White House is not directing it. The Department of Justice is not directing it. I'm not faulting the men and women of the FBI. I think we have an extraordinary amount of talent in that agency who are really well equipped to do this kind of investigation, but they're not being given the authority to do it. That's the concern I have.
Senator,
and let me be clear about it. The statistics are clear. You know, there's been a lot of talk about, well, why is she now coming forward? Why didn't she report? Over 60% of sexual assault victims never report the crime against them. And usually there is something that precipitates it later that triggers their feeling of responsibility to report.
So that's it. That is the essence of what I'm telling you, that the FBI has not been not only compelled, they haven't been asked. In fact, they've been told to stand down by this president. They have been told not to do an additional background check with this new information. They have been told not to go and talk to her husband. They have been told not to go and talk to the 3 other boys who are at this party. One of the boys in the room, okay, at the time of the allegation, at the time of the attempted rape allegation. They have been told not to talk to her husband, not to talk to the therapist, not to get the therapist's notes, and instead they're going to do some sort of a kangaroo court situation, just like the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas debacle, where they're going to have her testify and then Hill testify, and then Orrin Hatch will make up his mind, which is already made up. Orrin Hatch said she's all mixed up. She's all mixed up. It can't be true.
Do you think that any of these claims are legitimate?
No, I don't.
No.
I think this woman, or whoever she is mixed up.
Mixed up.
But I can't speak for her. All I can say is, no, I don't. I know the judge very, very well. I know how honest he is. I know how straightforward he is. I know how he stands up for what he believes and what's right. And frankly, if you were going to believe anybody, you'd believe him.
Oh, that is one disgusting human being, because Orrin Hatch, like I said, is the key that unlocks the door to the stolen documents. Orrin Hatch is the one whose legal counsel on his staff was stealing the Democrats' documents with regard to other nominees to other court positions from 2002 until 2004, and Brett Kavanaugh was receiving those stolen documents. And Orrin Hatch questioned him back in 2004, and Kavanaugh under oath lied and said he never saw any of these documents. He was asked again in 2006, and he said he never saw any of these documents. And then when Patrick Leahy examined Kavanaugh this year, he said everybody does it. He lied. This man has lied about everything. And that is why they sat on his documents. That is why we're still missing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pages of documents about Brett Kavanaugh's experience at the Bush White House, because it would be so obvious that he lied under oath repeatedly. With the sparse amount of materials that we have, the emails that we have, we know that Brett Kavanaugh received these stolen documents. We know that because Leahy released them. We know that because they've been published. And those documents clearly not only copied him, but had responses from him regarding the stolen documents. And he lied. And Orrin Hatch knew he lied because it was Orrin Hatch's staff that was stealing the freaking documents. So now he's saying, oh, well, we need to have a hearing so we could hear from him, we could hear from her. But I don't believe her. How could you have a Judiciary Committee hearing when a member of the Judiciary Committee has already said he doesn't believe the witness who hasn't even testified yet? How can you have a Judiciary Committee hearing when Charles Grassley has already decided his response to her allegation is to go hunting for 65 women to sign a letter with the help of the Heritage Foundation and the Judicial, Crisis Center and all, and to start spending money on TV? You know, the Judicial Crisis Center's already spent $1.5 million putting up stupid commercials.
I've been friends with Brett Kavanaugh for 35 years. I've never thought about doing a TV commercial. I'm not involved in politics. I'm a teacher. I'm a coach. I believe that we need to have bright, curious, open mind.
Yeah, she's a teacher too, Miss Teacher. She's a teacher too. She's a professor of graduate studies in psychology. She's not political either. She's a teacher too, who has evidence and proof that she experienced sexual trauma at the hands of Brett Kavanaugh 6 years ago. She told somebody. 6 years ago, she said it in a therapeutic setting, in a safe place, with her husband present. They, as a couple, have known this for 6 years. And the Judicial Crisis Network, they have to put up TV ads to tell you, I'm just a teacher. I don't have... This is ridiculous. The answer should be no. No to everything that's about to happen. No to Monday's here. Let the FBI go and talk to her husband. Let the FBI go and do the real background check. Talk to the therapist. Go review the therapist notes. Talk to people that obviously she told. Talk to the other boys at the party. I love how Brett Kavanaugh just denies that he was at the party where this happened when she can't pinpoint whose house it was or what period of time it was in 1982. Does that mean Brett Kavanaugh didn't party in high school? You know, I highly doubt it. Because here's Brett Kavanaugh's yearbook page. Here it is. I just posted my 9th grade yearbook on my Instagram account. Go figure out which one I was. Yeah, I did. But here's Brett Kavanaugh's a yearbook page. Brett Michael Kavanaugh. Okay, here are some of the clubs he was a member of. Actually, he was the treasurer of the Keg City Club. Keg City Club. 100 Kegs or Bust Club. I survived the FFFFFF 4th of July alumnus. Devil's Triangle member. Okay, boys, you know what that is, right? Thank you. Down Geezer. Have you buffed yet? Beach Week Ralph Club. And Gazanga. You're lucky. That's like his phrase. Really, he knows he wasn't at that party, even though she can't pinpoint which party it was. Yeah, the treasurer of the King City Keg Club, 100 Kegs or Bust, and the Devil's Triangle. Yeah, he was just a straight-laced, stand against the wall kind of a curious, dude. He didn't do anything bad. He didn't get involved in, any partying or anything. Give me a freaking break. Do you think that everybody that is on Capitol Hill is a saint? Do you think that? Oh, my God. And Kamala Harris keeps on saying the FBI must be ordered to do the investigation.
Is it possible that while everything she feels is absolutely firm in her bones, that she may just have the wrong guy?
The wrong guy.
I think that we're going to all be able to judge her credibility when she testifies before the United States Senate. But I believe her. She's pretty specific about the structure of the house where it happened. She's pretty specific about who exactly was involved. She didn't just name one person. She's named two.
Senator, you spoke with her?
No, I've read the letter.
And let me ask you this, Senator. In the culture right now, we have two conflicting things in justice. We have, on the one hand, people who aren't listened to who are accusers. Yeah. On the other hand, we have people who go to jail because they've been wrongly accused. So those two things to be colliding in a place where it's awful difficult because of politics to get things straight. How's that all going to get sorted out and get to the truth and have procedural fairness?
Well, John, I think that, listen, this comes back to the point about ordering the FBI to do a comprehensive and complete background check. I strongly believe that the FBI and in particular the people in the FBI who have the experience of dealing with sexual assault cases should be charged with doing an investigation. And again, this is about this guy's background. It's not about proving a crime. It's about his background. I have had many cases where there was enough evidence to believe something happened, but not necessarily prove it beyond a reasonable doubt in a courtroom, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen. The United States Senate needs to know who this person, Brett Kavanaugh, really is.
This is a job interview. I don't know why everybody thinks that this is some sort of a criminal prosecution where evidence has to be produced beyond a shadow of a doubt and a unanimous decision by a jury must be accomplished and gained. That is not what this is. This is a job interview. When you go for a job interview, especially for a corporate job, they are going to do a background check. They are going to check your credit. They're going to look at your social media. They're going to look at your Facebook page. They're going to look at your school, your background in school. Maybe even have a gander at your yearbook. I mean, all this stuff is now part of a background check for you to be, I don't know, a corporate person at HR, right? Because you're going to have to handle people's personnel files, and you have to be beyond reproach. This is a Supreme Court justice, and you don't think that the FBI, who does the background checks routinely on these people for these jobs, should be ordered to do a background check on Brett Kavanaugh? Not a criminal investigation, a background. That is what they do. And the president is sitting there lying, going, well, I asked them, but they said it's not their thing. Although they've done it 6 times before, specifically for Brett Kavanaugh. Who are you going to believe, huh?
48 hours ago, she came forward. And for the last 48 hours, she has been deflecting death threats and harassment and trying to care for her family and determine where they're going to sleep at night. And right now, she can't focus on having a hearing that hasn't been investigated and where Nobody has talked to her.
There are Republicans who will say, well, look, this is a stalling tactic by Democrats, that that Democrats had this information, had her allegations previously, and have delayed releasing them or delayed moving them forward.
The Democrats, Senator Feinstein in particular, respected her request for confidentiality initially. And that was the right thing to do, because victims of sexual assault have the ability to say whether and when those allegations should be made public. And so I have no problem with the way Senator Feinstein or the Democrats handled this. She came forward after these allegations were leaked, and her fears, unfortunately, have been realized, because since coming forward, her life has been turned upside down. And rushing forward into a hearing when she's under this much pressure isn't the way to do it. There's no reason to do it. It's not that there's a stalling tactic at play. She's more than willing to go forward and talk to the committee in whatever form that is, and to assist with law enforcement in their investigation.
Just not by Monday.
Nothing of substance and nothing legitimate can happen by Monday.
There, that's right. Nothing of substance and nothing legitimate can happen by Monday, considering that the President of the United States won't ask the FBI. I guess Trump does not understand what the I in FBI stands for. He must think it stands for him. You know, like FBI, like me, like Trump, like it's all about me. They're supposed to be my little flying monkeys. If I want them to go investigate, I don't know, a political opponent, then they will. And if I don't want them to investigate a political opponent, like, I don't know, the pressure of a name, Collins in New York, or, Duncan Hunter Jr. in California, then they won't. Do you know what I mean? I think he thinks that's what the I is. Everybody, in case you are a Republican listening to me right now, the I stands for investigation. All right. Just saying it is in their name that is what they do. And not everything that they investigate is criminal. They do background checks on Supreme Court nominees. That's why they've done 6 of them, because he's been nominated to various, positions, and that required background checks. So 6 times they've looked into his background. The FBI investigation has, except the president needs to ask them to do it since this information became known. They did not know this information. Therefore, they had no one to call. They had nobody to, talk to. This is so ridiculous. I just, I got to tell you, this is a really sick thing. First, let's go with what we got. And what we have is a lot of letters. We have a lot of stuff now. A lot of stuff. There, you got these idiots like Lindsey Graham going, I don't know. I mean, is there enough evidence?
All I can say is that I've been a prosecutor, a judge, and a defense counsel all of my life before I got into into politics. This case did not go before a criminal court because it's too old. No lawyer would bring it as a civil suit because it's just too hard to prove. The question for the Senate, is there really enough evidence here, given the nature of the allegation, how old it is, and the uncertain nature of it, to deny this man who's lived an incredible life a promotion to the Supreme Court? And if it was this bad, why did not the Democrats challenge Judge Kavanaugh when he was sitting right there in front of them?
What is your speculation? Well, what's the answer to that? Why didn't they bring it forward?
I think it's part of a pattern. They can't beat him on the law, so they're trying to destroy his life.
Okay, that would be incorrect, okay? They can beat him on the law. They actually showed him to be a liar, a perjurer. They actually exposed him lying under oath. I don't know why they don't go to the videotape in these hearings. I don't know why the Senate is so not modern. There is the magic of videotape. They could have done exactly what I did. They could have gotten the testimony from 2004. They could have gotten the testimony from 2006. They could have shown the answers then, and then after he gave the answer in 2018 about receiving stolen documents from the Democrats, they could have shown his response saying, oh, everybody does it. Everybody does it, which made him a liar in 2004 and 6 under oath. So, this, and the Democrats are not particularly known for obstruction. The Republicans are, especially with regard to the Supreme Court. They wouldn't even let Merrick Garland. Mitch McConnell refused to even allow Merrick Garland to meet with senators on Capitol Hill in the Senate when Barack Obama nominated him. They are the obstructionists. They are the people who stood in the way of every bit of progress that we as Americans were trying to achieve with the past president because they controlled the House and the Senate. They're the resistors. They're the obstructionists. So this is just it's ridiculous. And I got to say, the president knows or should know. I don't know what he knows. I mean, he's an idiot. But he said yesterday that the FBI should not get involved.
Will you ask the FBI to open its file, sir? Sir, will you ask the FBI to open its file?
How important is the I don't think the FBI really should be involved because they don't want to be involved. If they wanted to be, I would certainly do that. But as you know, they say this is not really their thing. But I think, politically speaking, the senators will do a very good job.
It's not really their thing. This is exactly their thing. This is exactly what they do. They do the background investigations on people who require background investigations in order for the Senate to be able to advise and consent to their forward motion in the government, right? That is what they do. But he won't ask them. I think I'm the first person that told you this. Now everybody's telling you this. Thank God everybody's telling you this.
Well, it would seem that the FBI really doesn't do that. They've investigated.
Oh, my God.
They've investigated about 6 times before, and it seems that they don't do that.
They don't do that. You just said they do that, and then you said they don't do that. By the way, the position of the FBI is in the newspapers today. They don't take a position at all on the credibility or the denial by Kavanaugh. They have no position because they haven't investigated, and therefore they have no position on whether or not she is to be believed or he is to be believed. They have to investigate. This is so sick. All right. So here's where we're at. Grassley, yesterday we didn't know what he was going to do. There was some sort of a mishmash of reporting yesterday about would he go forward on Monday, would he not go forward on Monday. Now we know. If she won't testify because she would like to, A, have the FBI go and talk to classmates, go and talk to her therapist, go examine the medical records, which she's waived privilege to for the purpose of law enforcement to look at. Go talk to her husband. Find out when her husband became aware of the name Brett Kavanaugh. The answer is 2012, 6 freaking years ago. What is she, clairvoyant? She would like the FBI to interview the FBI agent who performed the polygraph test on her. If she cannot have these things, and it's just going to be her, listen, she's a research psychologist. She's obviously got a PhD. She's a smart woman. She is a often published research psychologist. She is somebody who is very all this fake news. Laura Ingraham was tweeting out, check out her students' reviews of her, except it wasn't her. That was fake news. I mean, all this fake news. It's just so unbelievable. Tucker Carlson was spreading fake news. It's sick. And on Twitter, they're putting aerial photos of her house. People are threatening to come to her house and have protests in front of her house. She had to flee her home. She knew exactly what was going to happen because she is a smart woman. And now her worst fears, right? But imagine this, okay? I've testified in front of Congress, but the hearing, I've told you this story before. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty, but the hearing I had to do with media issues was when the Democrats did not control the committee, so they weren't able to ask for a hearing at all. Excuse me. They weren't able to ask for a hearing at all. So they had their own little sort of hearing kind of in the basement of the Capitol. That's where we were, not in the main room, in the basement of the Capitol, et cetera, et cetera. And because it wasn't, so we couldn't be sworn. It was a whole, stupid thing because the Republicans controlled all the committees and didn't want to hear from people who had real information about the thousands of hours of conservative media on talk radio versus the 3 hours a day I had. Actually, back then it was 4. I used to do 4 hours. No, I'm not going to do it again, so shut up. But it was still intimidating. And I was sitting there. Next to me was Al Franken. He was just a colleague of mine. We were working in the same place. He wasn't a senator yet. And we were all just slightly intimidated, okay? Because it's not a natural place for somebody to, speak, to give testimony and to have to go through the procedure and say, I'd like to admit this for the record and to know how to do that and to have them say without objection, it's admitted, whatever. So can you imagine this woman who is not political in any way, shape, or form, meaning not active in politics, not an experienced person with regard to giving testimony of any kind. Now she's going to be dragged in front of the Senate for a Supreme Court nominee, seated at a table, sworn in, attacked by white men on the committee who don't give a rat's ass about what she has to say, in front of the entire United States of America, after being completely and totally harassed to the point where she has to take her kids and leave her house. Yeah, that can't be, too daunting, could it? No. Anyway, this is the letter her lawyers wrote to Charles Grassley yesterday, asking him, can you help here? Because, quite frankly, this is bullcrap what you're doing. Why can't she bring witnesses? Why can't she bring documents? Why can't she bring people who might, know about whatever? Okay, so they wrote, Dear Senator Grassley, and these are her two lawyers, Deborah Katz and Banks. Okay, these are her two lawyers. Dear Senator Grassley, thank you for reaching out yesterday afternoon. Dr. Christine Blasey Ford looks forward to working with you and the committee. As you know, earlier this summer, Dr. Ford sought to tell her story in confidence so that lawmakers would have a fuller understanding of Brett Kavanaugh's character and history. This is not a criminal investigation, although it could be. And this is another thing we should talk about. But they continue. Only after the details of her experience were leaked. And by the way, they were leaked to The Intercept. And then BuzzFeed saw them, and these reporters went to talk to her. And this is why she felt her privacy was being chipped away. And now everybody wants to scream at Dianne Feinstein, who literally protected her privacy, which her lawyers agree was the right thing to do because that is what her request was. Anyway, only after the details of her experience were leaked did Dr. Ford make the reluctant decision to come forward publicly. In the 36 hours since her name became public, Dr. Ford has received a stunning amount of support from her community and from fellow citizens across our country. At the same time, however, her worst fears have materialized. She has been the target of vicious harassment and even death threats. As a result of these kinds of threats, her family was forced to relocate out of their home. Her email has been hacked, and she has been impersonated online. While Dr. Ford's life was being turned upside down, you and your staff scheduled a public hearing for her to testify at the same table as Judge Kavanaugh in front of 24 U.S. senators on national television to relive this traumatic and harrowing incident. Oh, yeah, add to my little story about how it wasn't really a very, very important hearing. This is like the most important hearing, okay? This is a hearing on whether or not Brett Kavanaugh gets to a lifetime appointment to the highest court in the land. But now, not only does she have to be dragged out in front of these hostile senators who have already said, we don't believe her, she's mistaken, and a little nutty, little slutty, she whatever, right? They've already formed their opinion without ever having seen a document or talked to this person. But on top of that, she now has to testify about the most traumatic sexual assault that has ever happened to her in her entire life. Right, that's easy, right? On national television to relive this traumatic and harrowing incident. The hearing was scheduled for 6 short days from today, and would include interrogation by senators who appear to have made up their minds that she is mistaken and mixed up. While no sexual assault survivors should be subjected to such an ordeal, Dr. Ford wants to cooperate with the committee and with law enforcement. As the Judiciary Committee has recognized and done before, an FBI investigation of the incident should be the first step in addressing the allegations. A full investigation by law enforcement officials will ensure that crucial facts and witnesses in this matter are assessed in a nonpartisan manner, and that the committee is fully informed before conducting any questioning, any hearing, or making any decisions. We would welcome the opportunity to talk with you and Ranking Member Feinstein to discuss reasonable steps as to how Dr. Ford can cooperate while also taking care of her own health and security. Sincerely, Deborah Katz and Lisa Banks. Those are her attorneys. How do you question a witness if you don't have any evidence on which to draw? The answer is you can't. It's a dog and pony show. It's a kangaroo court. It's a fake. It's a fraud. It's a circus. This is bizarre. This is bizarro world. This is ridiculous. This is unbelievable. But now another friend of hers, besides her husband who knew Brett Kavanaugh's name in 2012 and her therapist as well, a classmate of hers has written a letter that I will read to you. She posted it on Facebook. She has since taken it down because she's being attacked and she's not interested in it. But I'll read it to you. This is sick.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Christine Blasey Ford. Her story was revealed in the Washington Post yesterday. She alleges that back in high school, over 30 years ago, that man, Brett Kavanaugh, accosted her. She was assaulted.
You don't automatically necessarily need to be believed. You have to have evidence and credibility to be believed.
An 11th hour effort to derail Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court nomination tells you everything you need to know about today's left.
This has all the hallmarks of an 11th hour character assassination.
11th hour attempt to smear, slander, besmirch the character of Judge Kavanaugh.
11th hour political hand grenade.
They wanted this to come out right before the vote. That's why, Tom. Wake up. Just like they did with Justice Thomas.
This was in the early 1980s. It's now 2018. She was 15 years old. She's now 51. There is ground for some suspicion there.
Law enforcement would view it very, very skeptically because of the passage of time.
What took them so long?
All right, so she has no evidence, and if she does have evidence, she's not allowed to bring the evidence. She can't bring any witnesses to the hearing. She just has to go and expose herself to these people. Right. About the darkest day, probably, of her life. She has to describe sex and sexual activity and having her mouth covered and two boys trying to rape her in front of these people with no witnesses and no evidence allowed. Okay, that sounds like a good deal. Where do I sign up? All right, this was put on a Facebook page. I don't even want to say the name of the person because she does not want any more attention. And I don't blame her. I mean, I was tweeting last night and the trolls, you people are so stupid. You stupid trolls. You don't know what you're talking about, and yet you yell, and you scream, and you demean, and you name call. And people go, there's only, the reason why is there's a statute of limitations on rape is because you can't prove it all these years later. You can't prove it. Except that there is no statute of limitations on sexual assault and or rape in Maryland. You lie. You're a freaking liar. I go, why don't you just ask a lawyer or look it up? Stop yelling at me. It's just a fact. It's not going to hurt you. Just ask somebody. Somebody who would know. You don't like me? Fine, don't like me. Go look it up. There is no statute of limitations on sexual assault in Maryland. So this would explain a little bit about why Mark Judge doesn't want to testify. And then you got the trolls going, he said he doesn't remember. Well, then testify to that. If you don't remember, swear under oath that you don't remember. But if that's your story, that's your story. Testify to it. Oh, he can't be bothered, he says. He can't be bothered. He wrote a note through his attorney saying, I don't want to answer any questions. Well, too bad, because this woman with a definite memory of being sexually assaulted, almost raped, and nearly killed if it wasn't for your drunkenness, she believes that she would have been raped. She believes that she might have inadvertently been killed by you guys. She put a second person in the room. Now, if you were going to lie about being assaulted, why would you put a second person in the room? Who would do that? Why would you say that when this happened, there was a witness to it who was also a participant? Why would you do that? Unless it happened that way. That's why. That's why you would do it, if it happened that way. I mean, these people are just so stupid. Well, he says he doesn't remember. So then swear him in and let him testify that he doesn't remember. But remember, if he lies under oath or lies to the FBI during a background investigation, that's we've all experienced what that means. It's a crime. It's a felony. We get it. So swear him in. Let them people are so stupid. And here's another one that just seems to escape every single weirdo out there that decides to respond to me. They don't want an investigation because they think there's a statute of limitations, that we're ruining his life. Did it ever occur to any of you people that if it was investigated, there's a possibility that the evidence would show that he wasn't there or didn't do it or it never happened? Why wouldn't you want an investigation to exonerate him before he's sworn in on the Supreme Court? Why wouldn't the Republicans want an investigation if it were likely or even a possibility that it could exculpate him? I don't want to use the word exculpate because they don't know what that word means. Exonerate? Can I go there? Would you understand that? I mean, this crap is so unbelievable. And then, of course, they changed it. What about Keith Ellison? What about Keith Ellison? What about him? What about him? Somebody has to tell me what about him. Because all I know is there is a girl who moved in with him in 2015, moved in with him and his daughter. And his daughter has said that this woman was so nasty to her that she turned her old bedroom into like a closet for herself, that she was very territorial, and that by 2016, Keith Ellison was telling his friends, this relationship is not working out. They had a very bad breakup. She now alleges that he was abusive to her verbally, that he called her names and that he pulled her off of a bed. And she says there's a video of it. Okay, let's see the video. She says she misplaced the video. It's on her cell phone somewhere, but she says she misplaced it. And then she said, I don't want to show the video because I shouldn't have to. You should just believe me. Yes, there's a video, but I won't show it to you. Then in 2017, after she moved out, he told her to move out. She stayed there for another year. This argument that they had was after they broke up, and he told her to take out the trash, and she wouldn't do it. And he said, you better be gone by the time I get back. He was leaving to go to a conference on transgender issues. Yeah, he sounds like a real, piece of crap to me. But then when he came back, she was still there. And he said, when are you moving? She didn't move out for a year. She stayed there. They were in this bad breakup for a year. Nothing ever happened, at all. And then finally, she moves out. He starts dating another person. He says he's in a bad place. He said, I can't have a relationship now. And he broke up with the next person. And now he's dating another girl. And the girl who moved out after a year of being broken up with him is texting the girl that Keith Ellison is dating now, threatening her, saying, you didn't care what was best for him. You stole his affections from me. I mean, so that's the evidence. And then in 2018, she's still texting him. Still texting him. So what about Keith Ellison? I just want to know, what about him? If there's a videotape, let's have at it. She says there is. Let's see it. And if it's bad, and that's the end of it, right? He's running for election. He's running for attorney general. It's just that the people of Minnesota are still a little tender about poor Al Franken, who, you know, is not my best friend, but I did work with him for like 4 or 5 years. And I told you, that is not his MO. He is not a sexual harasser. He doesn't harass people at work. He never did. He is a full frontal kisser. When he greets you, he doesn't go, you know, you don't go the cheek thing with him. He's like full on. And it's a little shocking, but there's no sexual abuse. There's no, you know, danger. You don't feel like, you just feel like, what the hell, Al? Really? It's like fish lips. I've said that. But Al was forced out of his Senate seat, and he resigned. And now the people of Minnesota who are going to vote for or against Keith Ellison to be their attorney general, they know this story, and they understand all of it, and they will either vote for Keith Ellison or they will not. This is not the situation we are in with Brett Kavanaugh. This is not full frontal kissing. This is not a bad breakup story where there's supposedly video that she misplaced or doesn't want to show. This is a woman who was sexually assaulted by a man who we don't get to vote for. Our representatives will vote for them, who don't want to take the time to investigate at all. Oh, and by the way, there are attorneys looking at, there were attorneys, and there still are attorneys that are looking into Keith Ellison's situation. You know, the Democratic National Committee asked to have attorneys, impartial attorney, look into Keith Ellison's situation, except that the Republicans will not do the same in this situation. They won't. I digress. Here's the letter that was written by a classmate of hers. She writes, I signed this letter. It makes me, there's 600 people who went to the same school as Dr. Ford. And 600 women who went to this all-girls school called Holton Arms. These are very Tony prep schools for very rich, predominantly white kids, especially back in the 80s when their parents just, you know, wanted to, you know, say, get out of the house, or, you know, my kid goes to Holton Arms, or my kid goes to Georgetown Prep, whatever, just to get them away, you know, whatever. Like Trump's family sent him to a military-themed prep school to get him the hell out of the house, this kind of thing. When you have money, you do crap like this when you have kids that you find either very, very gifted or very unruly, or both. Anyway, she went there. And she said, I signed this letter. It makes me proud to have attended Holton Arms. The current situation involving Dr. Christine Blasey Ford and Supreme Court Justice nominee Brett Kavanaugh touches a very personal nerve and has unearthed memories, good and bad, that I had buried deep from my time at Holton. I graduated from Holton, and I knew Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge. I remember having a bit of a crush on Mark. He had a keen intelligence and sardonic, biting wit when he wasn't drunk, which was often, as were lots of teenage boys from Prep, Landon, and girls from Holton, Stone Ridge, visitation on weekends at parties, during beach week, etc. I asked him to go to my junior or senior prom with me. Can't remember now which one. I just remember how horrible I felt when he stood me up because he got bombed a few hours before the prom dinner. He showed no respect and had no remorse. Apparently, in 2018, some things have not changed, unfortunately. Christine Blasey Ford was a year or so behind me. I remember her. The incident did happen. Many of us heard about it in school, and Christine's recollection should be more than enough for us to truly deeply know that the accusation is true. We are all in some way from that time, at least me, Christine. And I applaud her courage and her dignity. The drinking ensconced in the puritanism and hypocrisy of that elite, privileged, mostly white Catholic Washington society was completely out of control. I recall having a few parties at my house and having to call the cops on my own party. We were teenagers and did really stupid, abusive, dangerous things. Nobody here has the moral authority over anyone else, no matter what elite school or college or brilliant career and beautiful family he or she may now have. I invite the women who stepped up in support for Kavanaugh in their letter, in addition to writing about what a good person, great athlete, student, family man, and brilliant professional Brett Kavanaugh is, and he very well may be all those things, to reflect on their use of the word integrity to describe him, and really to think about who they are supporting and why. In my case, even before Christine came forward, I was and still am completely against his nomination. I do not want him representing me or making decisions on my behalf on the Supreme Court, as he goes against everything sacred to me as a woman, mother, daughter, Latina, American, and professional, no matter how fine a person and upstanding a citizen he may be. If Kavanaugh truly had the integrity mentioned by those who support him, then he should be just as courageous as Christine and stop trying to dodge the accusations. Admit his actions from so long ago, speak from the heart, and apologize. By doing this, he would be giving the next generation and our kids and teenagers a huge lesson in humility, dignity, and humanity. Those would be the actions of a person we want on the Supreme Court. We want a person who has erred in his life, who has not turned the other cheek as he is now doing, who is not afraid to embrace his flaws, mistakes, and weaknesses, because it's that kind of person whom we can trust to make the difficult decisions and who will truly value human life and liberties. Being an outstanding student athlete with a wide circle of friends is way too superficial and does not do it for me. Not enough. My heart goes out to all involved who are now, whether they like it or not, facing their demons, which are never pretty nor easy to dialogue with, but they are necessary in order for us to accept that we are all flawed and ultimately human. That's a classmate. And then the same woman had tweeted, I graduated from Holton Arms and knew both Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge. Christine Blasey Ford was a year or so behind me. I remember her. I signed this letter. The incident was spoken about for days afterwards in school. Kavanaugh should stop lying, own up to it, and apologize. And then she took all of it down, and people who had seen it tweeted her, why did you delete this? And she says, hi all, deleted this because it served its purpose, and I am now dealing with a slew of requests for interviews from the Washington Post, CNN, CBS News, organizing how I want to proceed. Was not ready for all that, not sure I'm interested in pursuing. Thanks for reading. This is what is going to happen. I mean, it's happening to me, and I can't vouch for anybody, right? All I'm doing is showing you there is no statute of limitations in Maryland, and I get screamed at.
To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No.
Joining us now is that Senator, Mazie Hirono, one of the 21 members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
When you asked that question, did you have some sort of special background information?
No, I ask that question of every nominee who comes before the 5 committees that I sit on.
Wow.
And I ask those questions because it is really important that the Me Too movement, which is so critical to supporting women who have suffered this kind of trauma, that this not be swept under the rug. So I've asked this of at least, I would say at this point, about 100 nominees.
Wow. So during those confirmation hearings, did you know that Senator Dianne Feinstein had a letter from an accuser?
No.
Do you wish you had known that?
You know what? I think our focus should be that Dr. Ford has come forward very courageously, and what our committee is to do is, well, what do we do about it? Going back and saying, well, this, that, and the other thing, the fact is she has come forward with information that ought to be investigated by the FBI. And when Dr. Ford said she would testify, I think she expected a modicum of a fair kind of a situation. You know what happened right after she came forward on Sunday? I think that's when most of us read about it. That the committee said, oh, hey, we want to have a hearing with you. How about this coming Tuesday? Oh, if that's not good, how about Thursday? The callousness with which she was treated, you know, for any of us who have dealt at all with the experience of sexual trauma knows that this is a very particularly damaging kind of experience. And you do not treat a person who has gone through this like, oh, well, hey, how about this? You know, I think it's appalling. And I'm totally disappointed that all these people who have come forward to say, oh, we should hear from her. And now that she's expecting a modicum of fairness so she's not re-victimized, are now saying, well, if she doesn't want to testify, we should just go ahead. That is additional callousness from my colleagues that I am totally appalled by.
You should be. It is disgusting what they're doing. They're trying to, I will say, abandon ye all who enter here. It's perfectly, hellish on the Republican side of the Senate. I thought maybe Bob Corker, maybe a Jeff Flake. These are guys that profess to be extremely religious and based in truth and on. Yeah, well, Corker said, quote, Republicans extended a hand in good faith. If we don't hear from both sides Monday, let's vote. The hand you extended looked like this. Here's me extending my hand to you, Bob Corker. See that? My hand is extended to you. F you is what I'm doing with my hand right there. If we don't hear from both sides, like what are both sides? He tried to rape me and the other side is shut up and go away. At least we had a hearing. I mean, what is this? This is so ridiculous. And by the way, I got to say that in 2010, this is one of my listeners sent me this via email. Thank you very much. Apparently in 2010, one of Clarence Thomas's ex-girlfriends, who was also a Senate staffer, she worked for Joe Biden. She was a prosecutor, during her life. She's now 60. Well, now she would be 73 years old. But back in 2010, she was 65 years old and retiring. And she was no longer afraid that telling the truth would harm her career. Her name is Lillian McEwen, McEwen. She stayed silent about, Clarence Thomas for 19 years. She didn't say anything. She said she was a former U.S. assistant attorney, a Senate Judiciary counsel. She had dated him for years. She even accompanied him to a 1985 White House state dinner as his guest. She had worked on the Hill. She didn't want to enter into the political cauldron of the hearings. She was never asked to testify because at the time, Senator Joe Biden, who was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, he actually has said since that he owes Anita Hill an apology. I would get right on that, sir. I would call her like right freaking now. But Joe Biden, who headed the committee, limited the witness list to women who had a, quote, professional relationship with Clarence Thomas, and she had a social relationship with Clarence Thomas. But in 2010, when she was retiring, she came forward and she said Clarence Thomas always said inappropriate things about the women he met at work, and that she could have added her voice but did not. She said McEwen remembered staying silent even after reporters and biographers approached her wanting to hear about her relationship with Thomas, and were approaching other women who knew him well. But she said, I kept silent. I saw, quote, nothing good coming out of talking to reporters about Thomas, who she said still occasionally she sees. She did not want to do anything to harm her own career. Plus, she said, I do not look good in this story. This is the newspaper article from the archives of the Washington Post. There's two stories about her. One was before she published her biography and her memoir, and the other one is after she published her memoir. Okay, the one that after, it has so much more in it. I'll just read you this one. Today, McEwen is 65 and retired from her successful career as a prosecutor, law professor, and administrative law judge for federal agencies. She's been twice married, twice divorced, has a 32-year-old daughter. She lives in a comfortable townhouse in Southwest Washington, and she is silent no more. The event that prompted her to put pen to paper and write her memoir apparently was when the news broke in 2010 that Ginny Thomas, Clarence Thomas's wife, left a voicemail on Anita Hill's office phone at Brandeis. Anybody remember that? She called her up and she wanted Anita Hill to apologize to Clarence. She wanted Anita Hill to apologize to her. Well, this woman, McEwen, she said, well, that was just, that was too much for her. After this, she said she changed her mind and decided to talk about her relationship with Thomas. She said, quote, I have nothing to be afraid of. He was always actively watching the women he worked with to see if they could be potential partners. They had a very off-the-hook sex life. She said, commenting and scouting out women, that he worked with for potential partnering was, quote, a hobby of his. She said she disclosed this relationship to Joe Biden, who had been her boss years earlier. Anita Hill, who worked for Thomas at two federal agencies, said in her testimony that Thomas would make sexual comments to her at work, including references to scenes in hardcore pornographic films. Miss McEwen says, quote, if I used that kind of grotesque language with one person, it would seem to me that, this is Clarence Thomas' testimony. He said, if I used that kind of grotesque language with one person, it would seem to me that there would be traces of it throughout the employees who work closely with me or other individuals who are bits and pieces of it. That was his defense. And she laughed when the Washington Post read her that. And she said, quote, he was obsessed with porn. He'd talk about what he'd seen in magazines and film, if there was something worth noting. He had no problem. She said she had no problem with his interests. She just found porn boring. Well, it depends what kind he was watching. But according to Miss McEwen, Thomas would also tell her about women he encountered at work. He was very partial to women with large breasts. This is what Anita Hill testified to as well. In an instance at work, Thomas was so impressed that he asked one woman, what's your bra size? Presented with some of McEwen's assertions, Supreme Court spokesman Kathy Arberg said Thomas was unavailable for comment. Another woman came forward. Angela Wright, in 1984, worked as public affairs director at the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which polices sexual harassment, by the way. During Thomas's long tenure as chairman, she shared similar accounts with Senate investigators. She said once when walking into an EEOC seminar with Clarence Thomas, he asked her, quote, what size are your breasts? According to a transcript of Senate interviews, her story was corroborated by former EEOC speechwriters who told investigators that Ms. Wright had become increasingly uneasy around Thomas because of his comments about her appearance. But Wright had problems that made the committee Democrats nervous. She had been fired by Clarence Thomas. She had also been fired by a previous member of Congress, and she had quit a third job in government, accusing her boss at the time of incompetence and racism. And so Biden was, concerned that they would, discredit her. And so he didn't subpoena her testimony. Instead, he just put the transcripts of her interview into the record. This is what I'm telling you. Without objection, it's entered into the record. And that's how we know this, because it's in the court. It's in the hearing record. Another woman named Sukari Hardnett, who worked as a special assistant to Clarence Thomas in 85 and 86, wrote a letter to the Judiciary Committee that, quote, if you were young, black, female, and reasonably attractive, you knew full well you were being inspected and auditioned by Clarence Thomas as a female. McGowan recalls writing Thomas a short note before the confirmation hearings, curious about what he wanted her to say, and she said Clarence Thomas hoped that she would, quote, take the same attitude of his first wife who never spoke publicly. She said after retiring, she grew reflective of her life, blah, blah, blah. She said she met Clarence Thomas when he was still married to his first wife. He was working for Senator Danforth, a Republican from Missouri. She said he started coming by her house for drinks. Then they got intimate in 1981. They broke up in 1986. She says, I know Clarence would not be happy with me. I have no hostility toward him. It's just that he's manufactured a different reality over time. That's the problem he has. So if we put Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, you realize we will have a harasser and an attempted rapist